Good morning, children. Today we will start with the third chapter, What is Government? You must have heard this term many times. Your parents must have been saying that government is doing this, government is not taking action against this thing. So this is a very common term. We come across this every now and then. Now, you recently you must have seen that government has changed is planning to change the education policy, and they are working on it, and by 2-3 years the education policies things will be changed. Then they are taking you in the pandemic, government is doing this to overcome or to take care of the patients as the number is increasing. So that is like this term is very common, and it is heard in every household. So you must have heard about it. Now let's see what it is. Every country needs a government to make decisions and get things done. These can be decisions about where to build roads and schools, or how to reduce the price of onion when they get too expensive, or ways to increase the supply of electricity. The government also takes action on many social issues. For example, it has several programs to help the poor. It does other important things such as running postal and railway services. So the government also has the job of protecting the boundaries of the country and maintaining peaceful relation with other countries. Recently, government of India is facing problems with on the borders where China is there, and both the governments of India and China, they are trying to work upon it so that the tiff is sorted out between the two countries. It is responsible for ensuring that all its citizens have enough to eat and have good health facilities. When there are natural disasters like the tsunami or an earthquake, it is the government that mainly organizes aid and assistance for affected people. Recently, you have seen on the television screens and in the newspapers that people, those who want to contribute for the treatment of the in this pandemic because of the corona patient, the people, they can drop their checks or their contributions to the government account, so that amount could be used by government for the welfare of the people. Perhaps you are wondering how government managed to do all this and why it is necessary for them to do. There needs to be some amount of organization so that decisions can be made. Some rules have to be made that apply to everyone. For example, there is need to control resources and protect the territory of a country, so people can feel secure. Government do this on behalf of their people by exercising leadership, taking decision and implementing these among all the people living in their territory. Levels of government. Now that you know that the government is responsible for the for so many different things, you can think of how it manages to do all these. The government works at different levels. At the local level, at the level of state, and at the national level. So there are three levels: local level, state level, and national level. The local level means in the village, town, or locality. The state level would mean which covers an entire state like Haryana or Assam, and the national level means the entire country. Later in this book, you will read about how local level government functions. When you go into next few classes, you will learn about how government functions at state and central levels. Okay, so laws and the government. The government makes laws, and everyone who lives in the country has to follow these. This is the only way government can function. Just like the government has the power to make decision, similarly it has power to enforce it. For example, there is a law that says all persons driving a motor vehicle must have a license. Any person caught driving a vehicle without a license can either be jailed or fined a large sum of money. Without these laws, the government's power to make decision is not of much use. So you can say, you can understand it in the way, like when we are living in a house, our parents have also made certain rules for us. So that is very much similar to the laws. If you follow those rules, it's all right. If you violate those rules, then you get some punishment. Same way is the government, because it's a body which works for the whole country, so it has to enforce those laws strictly, otherwise people will find the loopholes and they will violate it. In addition to any actions that government can take, there are also steps that people can take if they feel that a particular law is not being followed. If a person feels they, for example, that they were not hired for a job because of their religion or caste, he or she may approach the court and claim that the law is not being followed. The government can then give orders about what should be done. So here they have told us about, given an example, that if a person is disqualified on the grounds of his religion or caste, he can approach the court, and the government would have to function according to the decision taken by the court. Types of government. Who gives the government this power to make decision and enforce laws? The answer to this question depends on the type of government there is in. Like for example, in our country, we live in a democratic country. Democracy means people have the right to vote. So we give the vote, and the party which gets maximum vote comes to the power. So it is the people who are forming the government, contributing in formation of the government. They do this through the election, in which they vote for one particular person and elect them. Once elected, these persons form the government. In democracy, the government has to explain its action and defend its decision to the people. So there is transparency in their policies. They have to explain what they are doing and why they are doing it. Another form of government is monarchy. The monarchy, in which the king or the queen has the power to make decision and run the government. The monarch have a small group of people to discuss matters with, but the final decision making power remains with the monarch. Unlike in a democracy, kings and queens do not have to explain their action or defend the decision they take. So they do not have to justify their action. They have people to suggest them, but then the final decision is there in the hands of the monarch. Democratic government. India is a democracy. This achievement is the result of a long and eventful struggle of the Indian people. There are other places in the world where people have also struggled to have democracies. You now know that the main feature of democracy is that people have the power to elect their leaders. So in a sense, a democracy is a rule by people. The basic idea is that people rule themselves by participating in making of these rules. Democratic government in our times are usually referred to as representative democracies. In representative democracies, people do not participate directly, but instead choose their representatives through an election process. The representatives meet and make the decisions for the entire population. These days, a government cannot call itself democratic unless it allows what is known as universal adult franchisee. This means that all adults in the country are allowed to vote. People who are above 18 years of age has the right to vote, and they can that doesn't mean that they can go and vote 10 give 10 votes, only one vote, right? So that is what an universal adult franchisee means. But it is not always like this. Can you believe that there was a time when government did not allow women and the poor to participate in elections? In their earliest form, government allowed only men who owned property and were educated to vote. This meant that women, the poor, the propertyless, and the uneducated were not allowed to vote. The country was governed by the rules and regulations that these few men made. Initially, they are talking about that women and poor people who didn't have the property, were not allowed to vote. In India, before independence, only a small minority was allowed to vote, and they therefore came together to determine the fate of the majority. Several people, including Gandhiji, were shocked at the unfairness of this practice and demanded that all adults have the right to vote. This is known as universal adult franchise. Writing the journal Young India in 1931, Gandhiji said, I cannot possibly bear the idea that a man who has got wealth should have the vote, but that a man who has got character but no wealth or literacy should have no vote, or that a man who works honestly by the sweat of his brow day in and day out should not have the vote for the crime of being a poor man. So this Gandhiji said this because he felt that it is like not justified. Here let's see what it is written. Nowhere in the world have government willingly shared power. All over Europe and USA, women and the poor have had to fight for participation in government. Women's struggle to vote got strengthened during the First World War. This movement is called the women's suffrage movement, as the term suffrage usually means right to vote. So this movement was started in the First World War. It is not only, so you can understand that not only in India but across the world the women were exploited. I mean, they were not having the right to vote. So suffrage means the right to vote. During the war, many men were away fighting, and because of this, women were called upon to do work that was earlier considered men's work. Many women began organizing and managing different kinds of work. When people saw this, they began to wonder why they had created so many unfair stereotypes about women and what they were capable of doing. So women began to be seen as being equally capable of making decisions. So you can say that this was like sort of the First World War could be the blessing in disguise for women, because the men were busy fighting, so women were called up to do the work which initially men did. But then after when the men saw that women are doing those work very uh, according to the they were coming up to the expectations, so they felt that why this discrimination had been done till now. The suffragettes demanded the right to vote for all women and get their demands heard. They claimed they chained themselves to railing in public places. Many suffragettes were imprisoned and went on hunger strikes, and they had to be fed by force. American women got the right to vote in 1920, while women in UK got to vote in the same term as men some years later in 1928. So women had to fight for their rights across the whole world. Please do the question answers given and study hard for the test which is beginning from day after. All the best, class. Thank you. Take care of yourselves. Be safe at home.